1776, a global startup incubator and venture fund based here in DC that's done a lot of work with startups in the Middle East. I'm going to be telling you a lot more about both of them shortly, but just a note about why Dr. Elyas is here today. And he's on a trip to the U.S. that includes stops in Chicago, at the University of Chicago, and in New York as part of a program called Bridges Talks. And Bridges Talks has been organized by MEI and sponsored by Aramco and the King Abdulla Elyas Center for World Culture to introduce Americans to the Saudi entrepreneurs and cultural leaders really shaping the future of Saudi Arabia. These are not the Saudis that most Americans are familiar with. And for MEI, it's been a very exciting past 10 months as we've traveled Saudi artists and filmmakers and poets and authors and entrepreneurs and activists to dozens of states and even more cities to put on programs and presentations connecting them with American audiences. And next week we're sending 3 Saudi comedians on a 5-city tour to Austin, Dallas, San Antonio, San Diego, and St. Louis. So if you want to know more about this unique, never one-of-a-kind Saudi comedy tour, come see me afterwards. Now, the King Abdulla Elyas Center is the sponsor of Dr. Elyas's tour, and it is a towering cultural institution that is set to open this fall in the Eastern Province in Dhahran. It features multiple museums, a library, a theater, a cinema, and is expected to really be a cultural game changer in Saudi at a time of new energy and dynamism in the kingdom. We have a representative from the center here with us today, Abdulla Rabah. Abdullah, please raise your hand. And if you're interested in finding out more about the center, please seek him out after the event. Now, before our introductions, just a few housekeeping matters. Can you please turn off your phones? And if you're tweeting, please use the hashtag Yalla Kareem, spelled Y-A-L-L-A, Kareem, spelled with a C, like Kareem. And if you're interested in entrepreneurship, please keep in mind that MEI's 71st annual banquet and conference are coming up. At the banquet on Tuesday, November 14th, we are honoring one of the Arab world's most active and impactful social entrepreneurs, Fadi Ghandour, who has done so much single-handedly to support and encourage and provide the expertise to Arab youth to become entrepreneurs in the region. We're also honoring Sheikha Hassa al-Sabah of Kuwait for her remarkable work promoting Islamic art and culture around the world. And the next day we have a very powerful lineup of panels, including one looking at women's activism in the region, featuring Saudi, Tunisian, Egyptian, and Syrian women activists. So please join us for that. That's on November 15th. Now back to our panel. We're very, very honored to be hosting Dr. Elyas today. Born in Saudi but educated in Germany, he first worked as a software consultant for a number of international companies, including Mercedes, Vodafone, and Sabic in Saudi. He founded the startup Anwani, which means address in Arabic. It's a cloud-based app for storing and sharing precise geographic coordinates, which was much needed in a country like Saudi Arabia, which, as many of you who have worked in the Middle East know, bases addresses on landmarks rather than actual building numbers and street names. And it was much needed for all sorts of services such as package deliveries. In 2013, it was voted as the most investable company by a French group, Sophia Business Angels. Now, Careem, the car company we're going to be talking about today, was founded in 2012 by 2 Dubai-based entrepreneurs, Mudassar Sheikha and Magnus Olsen. They later met Abdullah, learned about Anwani, and realized it would be critical to Careem's growth. So Abdullah kindly sold Anwani to them, and he became a co-founder and the chief people officer. Today, Kareem is the fastest growing tech company in the Middle East, operating in countries from Morocco to Pakistan, and including in Saudi Arabia, where 80% of its riders are women. It is known for its customized ride-sharing approach and its emphasis on corporate responsibility, and it's become the most popular ride-sharing company in the Middle East, much more popular than Uber. It's also one of only 2 unicorns in the Middle East, I've been told, and these are companies that are valued at over $1 billion. Now, Dr. Elyas is going to be talking about the disruptive power of Kareem today, and he's going to start by first giving a brief PowerPoint about Kareem, and that will be followed by a more in-depth conversation between Dr. Elyas and our moderator, Brandon Pollock of 1776. a global startup incubator and venture fund based here in DC, as I mentioned earlier. Brandon is a member of the founding team of 1776 and serves as the head of global affairs. He leads market strategy and outreach to influencers, including corporate CEOs and cultural innovation officers, investors, policymakers, and industry experts to enable growth for 1776 startups and partners around the globe. And that includes advising 1776 startups on how to grow into global markets and how to navigate the regulatory environment. And he's done a lot of work for companies in the MENA region. Brandon brings with him 15 years of experience in public policy and political strategy and was a deputy regional director on John Kerry's presidential campaign. Brandon will be talking to Dr. Elyas for about 25 minutes, and after that, we'll turn to you for all of your questions. One last note, I just want to mention that in your program books, there are evaluations. It's very helpful for us, for you to take about 2 minutes after this event to fill out the evaluations. Let us know how you felt about today's program. And on your way out, just drop it in the basket on the side table or hand it to me. Now, without any further ado, I'd like to present Dr. Elyas.
That's the clicker.
Yep. Are you able to see, or do you want to?
Yeah. So, thank you for the lovely introduction, and thank you for having me. I'm very pleased to be here. And when I look into the audience, I can tell that most of you know when they tweet what Yalla means. Do you? So it's let's go. So I say as well, Yalla, let's go, and have a quick intro to what Kareem is, how it is changing the Middle East, and what is next for this unicorn in the region. And maybe I start immediately with a small correction. A unicorn is a company which is valued at $1 billion US, but Kareem is not a unicorn, but it's actually the first unique camel in the region. So let me start briefly with introducing you to my entrepreneurial journey, and a lot was actually already explained, so I'll keep that very short. I'm coming from a family background where my grandpa and my dad were entrepreneurs. My grandpa was a commercial entrepreneur in Mecca, introducing hotels and rental cars as first in Saudi Arabia. And my dad, as you see on the next two pictures, he was a social entrepreneur in Germany where he built bridges with the society, which is mainly non-Muslims. He opened the dialogue and became a spokesman for Muslims in Germany, meeting the Pope and meeting the counselor to bring together and not to split. Now, as for me, I loved always this idea of having social impact and doing good. And my background was in computer science. So I figured out very quickly, during some social startups as well I have started in the tech world, that when you build software where people can connect, you can move a lot by technology. So my outcome is that tech entrepreneurship is the easiest way to change people's lives and to make our cities a better place to live in. And this was very, very vital for me and this was really the turning point in my life. Living the first years of my whole life in Germany, then being in Malaysia for a year between my master's and my master's studies and my PhD, I figured that there is a life outside of Germany actually. And it's actually super interesting and very exciting out there. So in developing countries where a lot of change is ongoing, you still can add a lot of value, way more than you can in Germany, which is so sophisticated and settled and nothing changes really. So in 2003, in Malaysia, I decided for myself that I want to go to Saudi and be part of the change we're seeing in Saudi Arabia, which I did then 6 years later, where I started Anwani, a app which is helping people to save their addresses in the cloud, where you, in countries like Saudi, don't have clear addresses. And with that, it was making the lives of people easy who wanted a home delivery being served without a cold pizza, which we then served with Aramex, the DHL of Saudi Arabia, and the region. And we had customers like Aramex on board as well. After 2 investment rounds, it was then acquired by Careem. Now, when we look into Careem back then, it was September 2014 when we did this acquisition. A lot of people actually told me, Abdullah, and it's great that you're selling your startup. However, maybe it's not the best company to join. With Uber out there and Easy Taxi coming from the US and coming from Germany, what can you really do against this competition with deep pockets? And we have been, back then, 40 colleagues operating in 6 cities with roughly 4,000 drivers whom we call captains to give them more respect. And we still went for it, and this is what happened afterwards. It really exploded. Today we are in 13 countries with 300,000 captains. And that's only 3 years later. So we exploded really from 4,000 captains to 300,000 captains. And the team, which was 40 back then, is today at 2,300 people who are working with us on changing the ground reality of the Middle East. And as mentioned, it's the unicorn and the only unicamel in the region, valued at $1 billion US. But what is way more interesting is how we actually did that. And I want to spend a couple of minutes on the recipe, which now looking back is easy to explain, but it was a lot of false trial and error to find it out. What I think is the most important thing to build a unicorn or to build a startup which excels fast and scales quickly is that your mission must be super, super clear. So having a very clear mission which drives people is essential to actually attract those people who are intrinsically motivated to work. So give them a very, very strong mission. And our mission is to simplify and improve the lives of people and to build an awesome organization which inspires in a region where people are looking up to Facebook, to Amazon, to Apple, to all these companies which are inspiring, but they are all coming from outside of the region. And when you look into local examples, you don't find many. So we want to build an institution where people look up to, where people are inspired by, and where people get into a school and graduate from it when they leave Kareem. Second, when you compete with a global player who is best in class, actually when the acquisition was done, I was told there are 2 companies you cannot compete with. It's Uber and it's Amazon, so forget it. And the reason was basically they have a lot of money. They can make your life miserable, and Kareem will die a quick die. But I think when you don't have a lot of money, you have to be just very bold and creative. And you have to outsmart competition. And I give you an example. How can I start the video of us being bold? This is what we did in Dubai. Now, this video was launched, and it was not published by us. It was just given to people, and they have started to spread it. As you see, there's nothing mentioned about Kareem in this video, right? So people shared it and said, the entertainment industry in Dubai is driving crazy. It's completely out of control. People are dying. And this video went viral. It was shared so many times. And the municipality was attacked in Dubai. How can you even do that? How can you let this happen? And after 3 days of this going viral, they found out that it's us. And they came to our offices, and we were asked to put it down. But it was already too late because it was shared millions of times already. And then 3 days after, we revealed. Can you click again? Sorry. Here. We published this video then. So, sorry. Now, when you don't have money, you have to be creative. And we invested in this video, including production and spreading it, roughly 19,000, almost 20,000 US dollar. And it went so viral that it reached 55 million people. 55 million people have seen this video. It went all over the news, and we got a creative award in Cannes for this campaign, which was done to reveal our new logo. The wink was the new logo, and we actually introduced this new logo by having this stunt in the beginning. And it was very cost effective, and we were on top of mind of our customers. And the third way to play in an environment like we are in is you have actually not to be embarrassed or not to be obsessed with competition, but you have to embrace them. It's great to have competition. So it's really great because you're learning so much. You are on your toes nonstop. And you have to improve your service, and which is at the end good for you, it's good for the customers, and it's good for your captains. And hence we are always embracing our competition, and we're taking them hats on. If you can just click. And by being not obsessed with competition, it's really about leading with ideas. So if you only look at competition non-stop, you're reacting. But if you think of your customers first and your captains, and you're obsessed with them, this is when you lead with ideas. Like, for example, the things which were mentioned here. We had later bookings, scheduled bookings before the competition, and we offered a service for kids where you book a car, you get a kid's seat, and no one else had it. No one is really caring about these things in the Middle East. But we did it, and it was very well received by our customers. And the fourth thing, which I feel was super important in our success story so far, is being very, very local. Because for us, that's our market. It's the only market we are in, right? We are now in 13 countries. from Pakistan to Morocco on the west. And in those markets, we are the locals. We understand those markets. We hire people who are from these markets. When I was brought on board in Careem and became a co-founder, I was the only Saudi who was operating in Saudi. And we learned that this is the success model. You have to bring locals on board who can run this business properly because they understand the customers better. And I want to show you a couple of examples how we were very local in 2016, looking back at what we did last year. So this is a car type for women, where only women drive, and it's only given to women. So yeah, it's really about being super local because this is how you can actually win over competition which is coming from far away. And the fifth and last reason to do well is when you bring on board, and this is maybe something we should discuss later on in our conversation, when you bring on board local, highly educated talent, which is intrinsically driven to make a difference in the region, you have to make it fun for them as well to work at Kareem. So this is a video we have published on the International Happiness Day.
We're implementing, let's see how it goes. And keep us
and one of the things that this is they do, they're fine.
This is our office in Dubai. Great. So let me maybe quickly, to close the talk, talk about the impact we have in the region. And I really want to make it very fast so that we discuss it later on together, maybe more in detail. In general, you know that in Saudi Arabia, a lot of women are not able to go to work. We're talking about 2.7 million women who are, because of missing ground transportation, not able to work. And what we did is really liberating them. And in the region in general, we have a lack of public transportation, right? When you compare it internationally, this is where our Kareem market is. It's really compared internationally, the markets with the least public transportation in the world. And we have a lack of car ownership compared with 800 cars in the US. You have per 1,000 people. You have 18 only, for example, in Pakistan, where we are operating. So the challenge is very clear that public transportation is missing, and Kareem is leapfrogging this public transportation by being super, super efficient with the same investment of 700 million US dollar. You can build a bus lane and create 180,000 daily rides versus 1.5 million daily rides when you invest the same amount in car hailing. And you are creating way more jobs whilst you're doing that. So it's really a way to leapfrog public transportation, which is missing in the Middle East. And we do, while we're doing that, we do care about minorities as well. We are looking into buckling up things which are not really interesting and important for people in the Middle East. We are looking into a ride with a kid seat, and we're looking into things like shown here in the picture, where we are taking care of people with special needs, which are usually people who are looked at the end of each development. And whilst doing that, we are creating a lot of jobs, which is one of the biggest challenges in the Middle East. We're talking here about 30% youth unemployment in the region, which is challenging all of us. And by doing that, we are stabilizing the region. And this is maybe something I will keep for our conversation, which just happened. Saudi Arabia opened the doors for women to drive finally. And I can tell you later how we reacted. And besides what we are doing in our core business, we are, because we are so local and we believe in making a difference in the region, we look into social challenges we have, like, for example, the refugee challenge we have in Lebanon, where we are supporting with the car type, where people donate, and we are actually helping families in camps, in refugee camps in the region. And this is how I want to close. What comes next? We are talking about a region with 700 million people, where on a daily basis, people are driving with their cars to school, to university, to their jobs. And it's amounting to 100 million rides being in that region, being done on a daily basis, 100 million rides. When you look into Careem, Uber, all the other car-hailing apps, and the taxi industry together, we are not even covering on a daily basis 1% of all these rides. So there's huge headroom to grow into, and there's still a lot we can add to our societies by doing what we're doing already. So we will continue to build crowdsourced public transportation. We will continue to empower women and drive social change. And we will continue to create a lot of jobs together with governments, being supported by them and putting our hands together with them. And by that, I'm sure you see as well that a tech startup can actually change the lives of people quite dramatically and be a part of a social change overall. Thank you very much.
Well, it looks like you guys have a lot of fun every day. Do you dance every day in the office? Because I think that's the best way to make people happy.
Yeah, so I cannot compete actually with the upcoming event where comedians are coming from Saudi. But no, we are not dancing every day.
I gotta say, like for people, especially in the U.S., I mean the video that went viral, it almost looks like something you would see during the Super Bowl. And you see the Super Bowl ads, and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe they just did that. And then you're like, who did that ad? So it's better than in any Pepsi or Doritos commercial we could possibly see during the Super Bowl. But again, my name is Brandon Pollock. I'm the co-founder of 1776, which many of you might be familiar about, since we're based here in DC. But certainly we have an office in Dubai and spent considerable time in the region. In Saudi and Egypt and the UAE and certainly other markets. So actually where I think I want to start, obviously you've attained a lot of success. I love the term unicamel, by the way. That's going to play over well. And so, as you talk about that, kind of your growth, but what have been some of the challenges? Because every entrepreneur, goes through these times. If you're scaling a company, whether it's raising capital or attracting talent, in addition to some of the viral videos, I mean, as you've grown as a company in the region, what have been some of the strengths, or what have been some of the even some of the issues attracting capital as you've gone through this process?
Yeah. A company like Kareem and every other startup in the Middle East is facing mainly three major issues when they are operating in tech. Number one, it's definitely the regulations. The regulations, the bureaucracy which is there to start a company at all, are pretty much standing in the way of entrepreneurs to start off. And the regulations in our case in specific are very challenging as well when you come and disrupt an industry. So there was nothing like car hailing in the beginning. I mean, our offices were even shut down. I mean, physically shut down. The door was closed, and there was a sticker, and it was saying this is not allowed. So in the beginning, it was quite challenging actually to convince governments that what we are doing is perfect for everybody who's involved. The whole ecosystem profits from that. So that's number one, a challenge. The second challenge I would say is the lack of talent, good talent in the region is a challenge. Because just the education in the region is not where it should be, and we are not producing the talent we need internally. How Karim reacted is we are focusing today on getting people on board who are educated abroad. That's mainly the people we are getting on board, who are leading then the business going forward. And we hope by that, over time, to overcome this issue by producing better talent ourselves, right? So that they come into a school, they learn, and you learn mainly from the people who are around you on a day-to-day, way more from a training you're sent to once a quarter. Right? So we want to build this environment where people come on board and learn and become better and then build their own businesses or join another startup. And the third thing, which is super challenging in the Middle East, is funding. Absolutely, that's super challenging. How to get funding in an ecosystem which does not know tech startups in general. The region knows agencies. So people are bringing into the country an agency of Coca-Cola, an agency of Avis, whatever. I can do a lot of marketing for other companies here. But it's mainly a consumer-oriented behavior. We're consuming, Arabs, the Middle East in general is consuming, and they are consuming a lot. So it's the highest consumption of YouTube videos worldwide. No other country has more videos watched per capita than Saudi Arabia. We're good consumers. We're not good producers, and hence the investment environment is not very tech startup friendly. Convincing people from the region to invest is not easy. We have been super blessed and happy to bring on board the best the best investors, including Daimler-Benz, including Didi, the biggest car-hailing app in the world out of China, and Rakuten from Japan. But it all started with only very regional investors who then grew with us over the journey. So that's absolutely, these are the three challenges I see, not only for us, but for every startup.
So let me ask you a little bit more about the regulatory component because, well, A, because we're in Washington, but B, when you're in a highly regulated sector, when you're in transportation space especially, you have different regulations you have to deal with. Here in the U.S., you deal with city to city, and you've seen your competitors like Uber that basically just went into a market, broke things, asked for forgiveness later. You have companies like Airbnb and others that have kind of taken the approach of building strong relationships from the get-go. And obviously, as you're dealing with country to country, especially, in some cases you have too much regulation. In some cases you have very little regulation. You have lack of balance. Is there a particular playbook that, as you went into different countries and went into different markets, was there a specific playbook that you had for growth within that market beyond the customer base and recruiting captains, but from actually dealing with the regulatory environment and building relationships? How did you guys go about doing that?
Yeah, very good question. So we believe disruption is not good. We don't go into a market and disrupt the regulator. We don't believe in that. It is a bit arrogant to do that, and it doesn't build, but it destroys. And at the end, we are locals, so it's in our best interest to get our cities on board. When I brought on board someone who is leading Riyadh today, it's millennials at the end who are running the show in Kareem. So a 24 years old kid coming on board and leading the city, and today it's the city with the biggest revenue in the whole network, making a lot of money. And what impressed me in this interview was that he said, I want that the people in my city have access to a car within 3 minutes whenever they want it. And he was saying my city. And that's a huge, huge difference to someone you bring on board from outside with a lot of background maybe, but no knowledge about the city and no emotional connection to the city. So we are locals. We are motivated to help our governments overcoming all the challenges they have. And hence, we cannot wait for the government to be fast enough because we are growing 30% every month, and no government grows
Which
that
is the
fast.
highest in the region.
Yeah.
Right? Month over month growth by any company.
It's quite high, and over time it fades out a bit, but it's now between 15 to 20% every month. But when you're growing like 30% in Saudi when you started the business, you were doubling your business every 3 months. No government is that fast. And so we were not able to wait, but we didn't want to disrupt as well. So we were running under the radar as much as we can. And wherever it was needed, we went out to the government and we talked to them. And we brought on board local investors who were helping as well lobbying. One of the first companies we brought on board in Series A was STC Ventures, who invested in us, which is the biggest telecommunication company in Saudi Arabia. Who's mainly owned by the government, and who, when you have this kind of an investor on board, it helps you, not disrupting, but massaging until people understand, and then
Massaging is definitely the right term.
Things change over time.
So let's talk a little bit about the region a little bit here. As you pointed out, first Unicamel in the region. What is from the 1776 perspective? As we've engaged more around the globe, we have seen the incredible trends ongoing for the last few years of growth around the Middle East. And it's not, there's been a kind of a perception issue, of course. I mean, there always is in Silicon Valley if you're not in Silicon Valley, right? But what do you think has been the impact of Kareem on the region from a positive standpoint of, look, there are great companies here. We have talent here. I mean, what do you think is your company as, how do you think you've impacted, as whether it's in the U.S. or Europe, how other people view the Middle East?
Interesting. So I hope we impacted positively. A lot of people who are joining us coming back to the region from the US and from Europe. And when we talk to them, they tell us, I never really thought of coming back, but this company is a tech startup which is even breaking international records, and it's exciting actually to be in that environment. But besides really the lens of looking only at Kareem, when I look into the whole region and other startups, this is a regional trend, I have to say. So yes, we are maybe the one success story which is great, but we have others as well. We have Souk, for example, which is a great success story, being acquired by Amazon. And we have other success stories where a startup from Saudi Arabia, it's called Saraha. I don't know if you heard about it, but this had international press. It was covered in New York Times and Wall Street Journal and everywhere else, talking about this weird startup which over 8 months after inception got on board 400 million customers, 400 million people who are signed up to that service. And the only thing which this app is doing is it opens up the channel for open feedback. So I can ask people to get feedback, and I get feedback anonymously. And that's it. That's like, it reminds me of Twitter. It's a very simple feature, but it took off from Saudi Arabia. So there's some good stuff going on, some nice success stories, not enough yet. But when I attended the World Economic Forum in Jordan, which was held roughly 3 months ago, before the event started, there was a group of 100 startups which were brought together. And when you look into these people who are running the startups in the Arab world, it is one very similar profile you see usually. It's Arabs who are coming back to the region, who are educated abroad, and who are believing now in the time to be good, to actually come back and build something. Which my generation, when you look at my generation, a lot of them are actually either just staying abroad because they're just used to it, they don't believe in change, or they were always locals and they are not so likely to build startups. But this profile in specific, people who are abroad, the millennials who are educated abroad and who believe in change, and that everything can be possible, they are coming back to the region and they are building nice startups.
So let's expand on that a little bit as we talk about talent. I think possibly a good example for you guys is in some of those comments as you hear about people that may have gone to university elsewhere and then come back, right? They have a strong affinity for the region. They want to see their company succeed. It's very similar to what you see here in the U.S. around cities like Detroit or Pittsburgh or Columbus or Denver, or this kind of movement that we've been seeing the last few years, something that we've been talking about, people like Steve Case have been talking about, where how do you really get great top talent into the markets? And some of that is the expats that you're talking about. Like me being from Detroit, Michigan, for example, people like Dan Gilbert and others have appealed to, executives, entrepreneurs, people who have gone to Silicon Valley or gone to New York, but to have that such great, strong affinity and love for their city to come back and grow their companies there. So when it comes from a talent perspective, in some of these cities, like I mentioned, like when they're looking to attract talent, they're looking at kind of that homegrown atmosphere. They're looking at people to come back, but they're also trying to attract, say engineers that might have been at Google or Facebook or any other kind of big company. So how are you also, in addition to these fantastic videos, I want to get into the culture in a second, but how are you also attracting more talent? Obviously, Kareem has a big name now, and it's growing. So how are you attracting more outside talent in addition to homegrown talent?
Yeah, very good. So I believe strongly that Kareem cannot become what it should become, a company which is really changing even more lives and offering more than only 1% of the rides per day. If we only get on board Arabs who are coming back. This will not work. But what we're doing today already is we are bringing on board international talent. And you can do that not in a city like Riyadh, unfortunately, but you can do that in a city like Dubai. So there are a lot of people who are working in outstanding companies like the Googles and others who are interested as well to experience the Middle East, and who a city like Dubai can host very well. It's a very young city, it's well organized, it's very structured, and it's super cosmopolitan. So you find so many nationalities. I think it's beyond 300 nationalities who are in Dubai. So we believe that this is possible in Dubai, and that this is where our headquarters is, and this is how we can build a great company. On the other hand, in the cities where you have to win every city, we believe that the person who comes in there, he needs to be or she needs to be a very patriotic local who understands her city best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to touch on a little bit about kind of your rival and how you've grown in the region. But first, the place I want to start now is, I mean, you went into it in your deck and how you've kind of competed with Uber. But how do you think now that rideshare is different in the region because of Kareem? Or the perception of it, or as we talked about, everything from enhancing jobs to potentially changing a mindset to how people view either rideshare. Frankly, have you seen even a cultural change?
Yeah, I believe that people are looking at ride sharing and the gig economy in general, not just as a business where you get your service and you're done. But it's a story we're selling, right? The story of change and the story of making things possible, starting small and growing. So there's a story behind that, which is sold, and and this is what we want to be. Ride sharing today with Kareem is not only a service, but it's a how do you call it, a lifestyle. Mm-hmm. It's a lifestyle because at the end we are doing things like, for example, the collaboration with UNHCR, and we're telling people, hey, it's important that when you have the ability that you give and help others. And we did the stunt with the Ministry of Health in Saudi Arabia, where we distributed vaccination on demand. And so we are trying to use our network to educate people as well. Mm-hmm. So I believe that car hailing today with Kareem is not just the service itself, but it's delivering values which we believe in and live inside the company, mm-hmm. Which are delivered then to society back as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I noticed that you had in there also taking people to the polls to vote, and that's something that you've seen yes. Kind of here with Lyft and Uber and Via and some of the other ride shares try to capitalize on too when you have various elections. As a way of, whether it's, elderly or, because that's always been kind of a staple in political campaigns, is how do you just drive people out to the polls and vote, and doing everything you can, carrying them if you have to get there and vote. So, yeah. That is obviously, expanding it. Sometimes you see ice cream for a day, and you kind of see all these kind of things. Sometimes it's gimmicky, and sometimes it has very social impact behind it. So kind of moving forward, right? So let's talk about a little bit more about the cultural piece, because you did talk, you talk about Saudi specifically, and you're talking about empowering women, especially 2.7 million women, as you pointed out, that were empowering them into the workforce. And now with the shift in drivers and being the ability to drive, how is that going to impact Kareem, do you think?
Yeah. So the day this was announced, I don't know if you know, but or if you have actually noticed how big of a news that is for Saudi. The day when the royal decree was announced that women can today drive in Saudi, this was a huge change in Saudi Arabia, not only in Saudi, but in the whole region in terms of women empowerment, gender equality, etc. And when this was announced, we announced, because today we have 100,000 captains in Saudi Arabia, 100,000 Saudi captains in Saudi Arabia. So when the royal decree was announced, we announced 30 minutes later that we're congratulating all women who are now allowed to drive, and we are happy to bring them all on board to become captains with Karim, and we're looking forward to the next 100,000 jobs to be created for women. So for us, it's something fantastic, and we already started even training women to become captains with Karim, although it's not yet allowed to drive a car. So this is going to be really allowed in June 2018, but we started already onboarding women to drive with Karim. Telling them it's not allowed yet.
But you're setting, what you're doing is you're setting up and growing your captain base.
Yeah, exactly. On the other hand, when you look into the customers, a lot of the customers we have today are on Karim because they don't have cars. Right? When I talk about women, so we have 70% of our customer base in Saudi is women, and 30% are. When we compare this number with other countries, so in Egypt and Pakistan, for example, in Egypt and Pakistan we have 60% women, and so the difference is around 10%. And we assume that over time, this is what is going to happen in Saudi as well, that the amount of women who are on the platform will go down from 70 to 60%, not a dramatic change. But on the other hand, the upside really which we see is that we are empowering women to work on Karim, which is fantastic as well. And that's usually a part-time job. So most of the people who are working with us, they have their full-time job and they do that in addition to, and this way you have more money for the household and and it's great actually because, when the generations we know today in Saudi, they are born and raised with a household where my mom has, my mom was actually driving because I was born and raised in Germany, but where the mom of a Saudi was not dropping off the kid at school. And when I needed to go and shop something, then I needed to wait for the brother or the father to come back home to give me a lift. So the way our kids were raised in this society was seeing that there's a dependency of women on men. And this is, I think, besides driving and non-driving, I think that's the core of the change, which is fantastic to see, that we are changing perception, actually, of how we look at women. So when we look up to women, this is when we can actually play a role in history in Saudi.
So let me open it up to questions. I want to get the audience involved here. So hand back there, go up first.
Please wait for the microphone.
Ismi Malika. My name is Mindy. I have a question about the recruiting of women, the experience as captains in other countries, okay? And do women in Egypt or in Pakistan ask only for a woman driver? And what are the dynamics of having a woman drive a man? In some of these countries that might be a little bit tense. And how do you see that playing out in Saudi Arabia? The gender dynamics are not simple in your part of the world.
Yeah, very good question. So when we look into the other countries, we can tell already what will happen in Saudi. So looking into Pakistan and Egypt, it's very clear that number one, the amount of female captains is smaller than the amount of male captains. So that's maybe an industry norm. We see it outside of the Middle East as well. In Germany, most of the taxi drivers are males. So in general, I think even if we open up the doors for women to come on board into this industry, you will see less women doing this job than men. However, the captains we have on board in Pakistan and Egypt and other countries, they are open to drive anyone or to become a member of the car type called Amira, which is reserved only for women who are our customers. So when I, as a customer, order an Amira, I know it's a female captain who is coming. And me as a captain, I know as well that only families or women are requesting this car type. And this is the way we reacted to the social environment, where people prefer this type of treatment. And I remember, so we have all hands meetings every week, where the whole team worldwide comes together and is on a call. And this is where we tell captain stories. So we invite captains to tell their stories, because we believe really in being intrinsically motivated to do the job. And at the end, for us, it's not a job, it's a mission. So when we hear the impact we have on the captains' lives, then we do our job better. And one of the stories really which moved us was the story of a female captain in Pakistan who was a mother of 3 kids and who was on Kareem working after her husband passed away. So she went out, she provided for the family, for her 3 kids, and she is an activist as well for human rights, and she wanted to make a statement that that's a job every woman can make, and I will do this job, and I will show that it's actually a honorable job to go for and to serve even males and bring them to wherever they want. And she was telling a lot of stories about men who ordered her and then who did not know exactly where to sit, in the front, in the back, and who were calling her to understand where the car is, although she was standing right in front of them. So no one is expecting a woman to come. And so I see there's a lot of funny stories coming up. But at the end, this change is good. It will maybe take some time, but I believe it's taking less time than we expect.
This is a cultural question of a different kind.
Yeah.
I've been in Saudi Arabian cities from Abha to Unaiza, right? And I
More
don't
than
believe,
me.
I don't believe anyone has ever set up an appointment or scheduled a meeting with using a street address. People may not even have them or know what they are. That's not how you do it. It's behind the Sheraton, you go this way, right near the mosque. What do you put into your phone when you're hailing a ride in a city in Saudi Arabia? What do you enter in there to tell the driver where to go?
Yeah. When you open the Careem app, it pinpoints your location directly. So based on the GPS signals and the Wi-Fi we have, we know where you are. So ordering a car is quite easy with that technology. However, when you want to tell the captain where to go, you need to tell him you need to tell the app an address, right? And we overcame this issue by saving a lot of the locations we have in the city manually. Yeah, because at the end, a lot of the people, like you said, they're explaining how to get somewhere by landmarks. Right? And we actually went down and mapped the city, the bigger cities. We have teams on the ground who are mapping landmarks and putting them on our app in Arabic. So if you enter the hotel name or whatever in Arabic, you find it directly, or any any important landmark you know. A lot of times, Google does not have these landmarks properly. So we add a layer of our own address, if you so like, of our addresses to make it easier for people. And in response to the missing addresses, we have not done it like the competition. When you order a car on the competition, you're first asked where you want to go, right? This is the first question you're asked to fill. And we know that people don't know exactly what to enter here. That's why we have left it for customers to tell the captains even verbally if they want.
Back there.
Thank you so much for your time. I have a question about upward mobility within Careem for women.
Can you speak louder?
I have a question about upward mobility within Careem for women. You operate in different countries with different cultures, different cultural mores, and I'm wondering if you could explain what you're doing internally within the Careem company itself for upward mobility, and is there upward mobility for women captains to move into Careem if they wanted to, to a management perspective? And then tacking on to that, are you competing with the pink taxi out of Dubai, or, I mean, are you drawing drivers from them?
Yeah, good. So we have a program within Careem which is called Queen, Careem Women Empowerment. And within this program, we do a lot of things. Number one, we are reporting the numbers of women in Careem in the workforce on a monthly basis. And we're doing that level-wise even. So it's, we want to get to a specific level of women in leadership position, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a report we are issuing company intern every month, and we have a rule that we don't hire in leadership positions only if a part of the people we are recruiting are women. So we cannot close a position in Dubai. I'm talking Dubai now. We cannot close a position only after we have interviewed actually women as well for that position, even if it takes some time to find. And that's in the talent scarcity we have in the region, that's putting even more burden on us. However, we believe only if you really have diversity in your teams, you can build something amazing. We are not yet there, and the market is not producing enough women as well who are enough educated and who have enough working experience. So it's not only a Kareem topic to tackle alone, right? So we believe when we continue doing what we are doing, hopefully we are producing a lot of women we're educating and developing a lot of women who are coming on board in Kareem and who are growing with us throughout the journey. So that's one. And then you ask about
Captains into the business and also how you compete with the all-female taxis. Like,
Okay.
For example, if I land in Dubai, I'm
Yeah.
shipping it over to the all-women taxis.
Yeah.
Because I'm a market for them.
Okay. So definitely, I mean, we are acquiring captains from everywhere, and if they come on board from having been driving with a taxi and now they want to drive a different car which is not labeled from outside, etc., and make different money, then they are very happy to come on board, right? There is not a specific program for female captains to come on board and drive with Kareem. There's nothing like that. But we have a couple of stories, and it's rare, I have to say, but we have a couple of stories of captains who worked as captains first, and then they became part of the Kareem team. There are a couple of, I know, in Saudi and in most of the other countries, we will see them as well. But there's not a program as such, I have to say, where we are pushing it. And what we did, on the other hand, is we actually took care of the kids of our captains by providing better education for them. So we opened up the ability for captains' children to come on board in Careem and to do a summer training whenever they want, so that we help their families. And I lost your last question. Yeah? Okay. Good. Great.
Thank you. I'm a member for UNESCO Task Force, and one of the projects we have is with the Library of Congress, the World Digital Library Project, which digitizes cultural heritage, natural heritage from all over the world. Very much underrepresented area is represented by MENA countries. First of all, congratulations. I am very impressed how you managed to reach out so effectively. My question is, there's a lot of work to be done to explore, to organize, to digitize, and to use for cultural heritage for after school development, tourism, and so on. How would you think MENA countries should do it? UNESCO now is in transition and very likely to be more business-oriented soon. So, which means UNESCO resources will be available, knowledge and others for MENA countries, especially very likely. Okay, how would you, if you were asked to engage in such a project, how would you apply your experience, your competence to roll out, at least for MENA countries, the documentation of cultural heritage, archiving and using it for real value creation, including, I emphasize, after school, out of school education, including for immigrants, workers in Saudi Arabia and other countries. I hope it makes sense. Again, congratulations.
Thank you. So there's only so much we can do as a company, but I believe a lot of the issues we are facing in the Middle East, only companies can tackle. So when we went to that camp, the refugee camp, and we just walked simple math through the numbers. When we look into those who are living below the poverty line in refugee camps, we're talking about 70% of the people who are below the poverty line. And when we're talking about the extreme poverty line, we're talking even about 50% of the refugees who are below the extreme poverty line. That's for the refugees in Lebanon, in Beirut mainly. And simple math of just calculating the amount of money you need to give them $170 per month, which is what the program we are contributing to is offering them, $170 per month for a family. This totals up to $1.5 billion every year for only those who are refugees and below the extreme poverty line. Just as an example, to show that governments, when you just think of the money needed, governments alone will not be able to tackle a lot of the social problems we have, but companies have to provide and be part of the solution. I don't have a clear answer to your question of how Karim can help on education, but my answer to that question is a more general one, that we have to build companies who are mission-driven and who contribute with the money they make to society. And we're doing that even structurally today by having someone on board whose only task is to look after these things, after corporate giving. And we hope by that to inspire others. So we brought on board Nadia Rushdi, who her role is to be head of sustainability and social impact. And she's looking into ways to do corporate giving. And just think about it. We have 10 million customers and 300,000 captains today. By 2020, we want to be at 1 million captains. And this network we have everywhere in the region can be super easily capitalized by asking our customers for donations. And then these donations can be given for good causes and for things the UNESCO is doing to protect the heritage in general in our societies as well. And even if it's only making a stunt like we did for other causes, making a stunt to make people aware of the issues we have, in collaboration with the UNESCO, then this is fine as well. We would love to do that.
Last question.
Thank you very much. You were impressed by the guy that said that talked up. You were impressed by the guy that talked about my city. I was impressed that you would volunteer to pull that stunt and to be filmed. I wonder what it felt to travel through the air, but we'll leave that there.
No, this was computer animated, so no one really flew.
So, okay, the serious questions now. Two questions. How have you handled cash payments, and how do you handle surge pricing?
Yeah.
Has that been an issue? And the second question, are there any countries between Morocco and Pakistan that you are not in currently, and what do you look for, in order to make the decision to go into those countries?
Very good. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, cash is a huge issue in the region we are working in. All car-hailing apps here are cashless. All are cashless. So when you sign up to the competition we have in the region, they are operating here on credit cards, basically, which is fantastic for the whole process. Handling cash is a curse. But we've seen very quickly that if you don't do that in the Middle East, you cannot scale fast enough because a lot of people don't use their credit cards or don't even have. So 40%, just to give you some numbers, 40% of the people in Saudi own a credit card, 60% don't. And when you look into the people who are actually using them, it's only not even 5% who are using credit cards in their day-to-day. So it's a cash society, cash is king, and we were the first company to actually open cash payment within our cars. We didn't know back then how big of an issue that is actually, but we just did it, and we learned by growing and failing and doing again and changing. So this gave us a lot of growth, I have to say, by just doing that. And we did that roughly a year before the competition did, and this gave us so much head start compared to the competition. So how did we do it? As I mentioned in the beginning, we just tried to pilot it, and today it's very clear that you have to live with people who are not paying, and then you have to block them, and you have to give some of the money back to the captains. So you have to afford from your own savings to make the life of the captain better. And when later on the customer pays off his dues, then you have to get the money and collect it and give it back to the captain. So it's a very complicated process, and we're doing that today in order to make the lives of the captains better and the lives of the customers. And you asked as well about surge pricing, right? Surge, we never had surge when we started, and surge pricing means when there's not enough captains on the platform, then you have to pay more. I think you are familiar with that, right? So there is no way around it, I have to say, in this industry. I don't know a way around it. Because at the end, when you don't surge, you cannot, it's a marketplace. You cannot really manage, in a good way, demand and supply. And the captains will not work with you if you don't do that. Because they will go to another platform which is giving them surge pricing, and they will make more money there. So you have to actually do that to manage. And the way we have to do in the background, we have just to reduce the amount of surge we're doing by getting enough captains on board. And hopefully women captains is a good solution for that. And then you ask about which countries we are in and which we are not in the region between Pakistan and Morocco. We are today in 13 countries, and there are still some left out in the middle. So, for example, we are not in Tunisia and Libya, which are very interesting countries to go into yet. So North Africa is still a little bit to be explored. We are in Morocco and Egypt, but the North Africa is definitely still interesting. And besides that, in a lot of countries we are in today already, we want to go even deeper into more cities. So there's a lot of room to grow into countries we are in already, into more cities as well.
Well, I think it's pretty clear there's only one ride-hailing app to take when you're next in Beirut, Casablanca, Cairo, or Riyadh, and that's Careem. It's been such a pleasure hearing from the co-founder, Dr. Abdulla Elyas, and Brandon Pollack. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to fill out your evaluation forms before you leave. Please join me in thanking everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's do a quick selfie before
Yeah,
you get
absolutely.
bombarded.